Hello, Lillian. Based upon your comments at the end of class last night, I have several ideas I'm going to toss out to you about the possibility of scientific research into the rules of attraction, physical attraction, based on a variety of factors. So you had mentioned about attraction to certain ethnicity. Years ago, we're probably talking 30 years ago, there was a popular magazine in San Francisco, and the cover story was Caucasian men and Asian women. And it was wondering why there were so many cases where Caucasian men were choosing to date and possibly marry Asian women. And this made sense in San Francisco because in 1986, San Francisco Bay Area got an Asian majority population. So there were plenty of Asians around. But why was it that so many Caucasian men were pairing up with Asian women and so few Asian men were pairing up with Caucasian women? So several hypotheses were put forward. There was the feminist hypothesis that said many women from Asian cultures are sort of trained to be subservient, so macho men who don't like feminist women would prefer Asian women. Another one had to do with this long history of U.S. servicemen going back to World War II, probably even earlier, who would end up going over to Asia to fight in a war, and then they would end up coming back with a Japanese bride or a Filipina bride, etc. So there was an awful lot of that. There's the whole phenomenon of mail order brides that men at different times are in a position to say, okay, I want to get a wife, and where can I get one from? And so then what happens is if you have communities where, for economic reasons, there are women who are saying, I want to get out of this poor place where I have no opportunities, and I'm happy to basically become the wife of some guy over in the States who can bring me in. So there's an awful lot of pairing up of Caucasian men and Asian women in that respect. More recently, with the fall of the Soviet Union, there were an awful lot of mail-order brides available to men around the world who were coming from former Soviet Union countries. So a lot of people sort of maybe paired up with Russian and Ukrainian women. Now, one of the things that we need to separate is the notion of sort of attraction, physical attraction, for desire for a mate, and marriage, because they're quite separable. Historians and sociologists will tell you that marriage is fundamentally an economic principle. So the idea that we are attracted to other people and then who we marry, these could be quite independent. All right. So, back to Asian men, Caucasian women. One of the most reasonable hypotheses had to do with the fact that in just about any population on the planet, the males are bigger than the females. So generally, men marry women who are shorter than they are. So there are certain populations that are shorter than others. So the average Asian person is shorter than the average Caucasian person. So that not only explains why Caucasian men would marry Asian women because they're shorter than them, but why the reverse would not be true, because the average Asian man might actually be shorter than the average Caucasian woman. So that would explain why it doesn't go in the other direction. All right. There was a story a couple years back about the evolution of the blonde. Why are there blondes? And it turns out blondes just, show up as a mutation. But the sort of tremendous increase of blondes was connected to a recent ice age. People throughout the planet engage in often what's called hunter-gatherer groups. So the men go out and hunt, and the women gather fruits and berries and other things, roots and things like that. When you get an ice age, there's no more gathering going on. It's all about hunting. The only way to stay alive is to hunt. Hunting is dangerous. So when you have an ice age and you have the normal distribution of equal numbers of men and women, but then the men are engaged in this very dangerous activity of hunting, they get trampled by woolly mammoths or eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So suddenly there's a shortage of men. When there's a shortage of men, they can be picky about the women that they choose to marry, or they may not even have had the institution of marriage at this time. So what happens is there's few men, a lot more women, and then just through mutation, a blonde shows up, and this guy who can now be very picky goes, "Ooh, I'm going to get her. I want that blonde." And so the evolution of blondes in Europe at a certain time, their arrival was connected to uh, the Ice Age. Now, because blondes is sort of a recessive characteristic, they're saying the last natural blonde will be born, in the year 2200 or something like that. So basically, natural blondes will start disappearing. All right, there's another article that asked, why do human women's breasts stay prominent from puberty through the end of their life? Because most other mammals, their breasts are only prominent when they are about to bear young, and then they bear the young. The young suckle on the breasts, and then once the young don't need that anymore, the breasts shrink back to a much smaller size. So what is it about humans that caused human females' breasts to stay prominent starting at puberty? So you might recall that in the movie that we watched, our favorite sexist James Watson, when he was asked if he liked Rosalind, um, uh, the who was it other? The other scholar says, "Do you think she's beautiful?" And he says, "She's not my type." And he says, "Well, what's your type?" He says, "I like women with bigger breasts." So there is this attraction among humans to women with larger breasts. Why did that happen, and what's that about? Now, here's one of the most fascinating. It has to do with pheromones. So pheromones are these things that we emit, and people can smell them. And so they did some research about women smelling the t-shirts of men who had exercised in the t-shirts, and they had a preference for the smell of men who were then considered to be attractive because symmetry is considered to be an attractive feature. So if you have a person who is sort of symmetrical, that is considered attractive, and women were regularly picking the smelly t-shirts of men who were symmetrical over the men who were asymmetrical. So then one of the explanations for this is symmetry could be read as a sign of health. So a woman would like to pair up with a healthy man. Now, another interesting thing was, depending upon where they were in their menstrual cycle, they would have a preference for symmetrical men or asymmetrical men. And so apparently when they could conceive, that's when they would be most interested in getting a symmetrical man, or an attractive or handsome man. And when they were not in a position to conceive, then they would be attracted to the smell of asymmetrical men. And so this is kind of um, a fascinating aspect of attraction. So I'm going to just save this, put it on YouTube, send you a link to it as a variety of things that you could think about as you're trying to figure out what science can tell us about the rules of attraction. Talk to you later.